and welcome to our galley. The last time we brought you all in here, we were putting the stainless into the area behind the stove. Now we're fixing up all these workbenches. This is Brilliant 2, a Kelly Peterson 44 built in 1978. This is us, the Smallwoods. And this is the story of our long overdue boat refit. Welcome along for the ride.
So the plan for the galley here is we're going to replace the old horrible Laminex with a light colour, I think it's going to be almost white, Corian. The thinnest we can get in the colour we want is 1/2 inch or 12mm. What I'm going to do now is just measure up a local company, Gangamai, cabinet makers. They're going to cut our pieces for us, slightly oversized, so I can trim them down to the exact size, and we'll polish the edges and route them. And then we'll fit it all. Shouldn't be too hard. After the Laminex job, I think anything would be easy. So I'm just going to measure it up now. We're going to do this surface, this horizontal surface, and the backboards here. We're going to have to cut these electrical sockets in, etc. again, but that's no drama. I just didn't really like the look of the white wet area laminate panel back here, so we're going to do that with the Corian as well. So I'll get into it now and measure these bits up, and we'll go and make the order this afternoon.
So the first thing was tackle any overhead work, because obviously as we start working on this, we don't want to be having glue and things going off. So you can see here there's some headline section that goes along here. It continues around. In fact, it actually goes right the way along the coach roof side to the forward bulkheads. Now's the time to tackle that. So that's the first cab off the rank. We're doing this with white Laminex. Julian's patterned all that up and is at the fitting stage. What we got here is one of the headliner pieces. This used to be the same old hub ceiling foam back vinyl up here, so we've ripped all that off back to the fiberglass. We've made up these headliner pieces of 3mm marine ply, and they're lined with like a satin or matte finish Laminex epoxied together. And we're going to glue these up in here, and we've got a teak strip to act as a cover piece here. It's just 5mm cut down, inch wide, with a little bull nose on it, and that's just going to finish the edge off like that, so you don't see it join. I'll show you another area where we've done that. That is here on this bulkhead. So this strip here is actually one of said strips of teak. It covers the join, and as you move away from it, nothing to see here. You'd never know. And that's exactly the same principle as what we're doing over there. Yeah. Putting all these headliners up, obviously you're working above your head, and I'm not using any fasteners or anything. I'm gluing them all up with thickened epoxy, otherwise known as Techniglue in Australia. And the method that I'm using is very simple, but it's not something that you would always think about first up. Probably seen in other videos how when I glue things up, everything's propped up with these bent pieces of plywood. It's actually very effective. You can see here, I've got my headliner piece glued in. I've got the batten, which keeps everything in a nice even curve. It's thin enough to actually take the curve. It's only a very slight shear line. I've got all my bendy bits of ply in place, holding everything together until tomorrow morning, when the glue will have all set. I can take them down.
to start on a bit of woodworking. These are quite big pieces of teak. These are the trims. Here's what they will look like when they're finished. And before this was replaced by a shipwright, there were teak trims that ran all the way along here on both sides of the coach roof. So these have to be replaced. They were actually destroyed when they were taken off, unfortunately. So I'm going to make up new ones. I have the teak stock. I had it cut down to a bit oversized. They're going to be 5mm wider than the original ones for reasons that I will explain. This surface here doesn't look like it, but it's got a bit of a wobble in it. And this surface here doesn't look like it from here either, but it's got a bit of an up and down wobble. And I've got to try and disguise that as much as possible. So I'm going to cut this teak trim so it actually overlaps by about 3 to 5mm at the bottom to help cover the undulation here. And what I'm going to do now is make a pattern. Anyone who's worked with teak before knows it's really expensive. You can't make a mistake. You have to cut it down to size right first time. And for that, you make a pattern and make sure the pattern fits. So what I've done to give myself a pattern, I know you can measure the 2 angles and do all that. If you've actually got something there to copy as well, you're less likely to make a mistake, like cut the angle the wrong way or something like that. I've basically made the shape of the end of the teak piece here by sandwiching 6 pieces of 3mm ply together with the same angle cut on the end of each one, and that'll give me my other angle running through here. And these are attached to a single strip which runs all the way down the 3.6 meters down to the other end. Now I'm about to get my 6 pieces of plywood which I've already cut. I'm going to do exactly the same thing down the other end in that corner. These 2 rather large teak planks here that you can see are probably the most expensive bit of teak that we've put in the boat so far. One piece is 3.6 meters long, the other piece is just over 3 meters. They're actually quite complex pieces to shape, and I've only got one chance. You only have one chance with wood. If you stuff it up, you've got to replace it with another bit or scarf another bit in, etc, etc. I've got my piece of teak cut oversized behind me. I've already marked this on here, and then I just do my 3 preliminary cuts, which is this one here. Just cut that in about 1 millimeter deep. I'll roll the teak onto its side. I'll do the same thing there. Cut the other angle on the other side. Lay it flat, and I'll cut that off once I've got 2 hands to use. Now you might say, well, why don't I use a power saw here, like a compound miter saw or something? Once you start cutting with one of those saws, you can't really see if you're starting to make a mistake. Using a hand saw, it's a nice straight, very sharp, fine-toothed hand saw, you won't make a mistake because you can see, you can adjust on every single cut. So I'm just going to cut through this in real time. Turn it on its side, make sure I'm getting this angle correct. This angle correct. These cuts on the side actually act as a guide for the saw. I'm always checking the 2 side cuts, make sure the saw is following that second angle. And the bucket catches the dust. Or nearly all of it. Yeah, we're still following that angle nicely. There we go, nice straight cut. There's a little bit of a notch there, but this will have a bit of a sand before it goes on, I'm sure. I'm just about to countersink all these holes that I've drilled, the fixing holes for the teak trim. Already drilled them, already put the screws into the coach roof sides and just routed the edges off with a bull nose. I found the countersink that fits my plug cutter. If you do a bit of teak work and you haven't got any plug cutters, get some, because they are worth their weight in teak. Literally costs a fortune to buy them ready-made. Anyway, when you countersink a hole, it's got to be drilled to an exact depth. You can do that by using a bench drill, which I don't have. All I've got is my cordless here. What's a good idea to make sure your countersink doesn't go too deep is find a piece of tubing. I've just got a piece of an old paint roller here, which has a plastic core in it. Cut that plastic core off to the right depth. Whoops. I'll slide that over my countersink. There you go. I can only drill that countersink to 10 millimeters deep, which is what I want. You can adjust it to whatever you want. So you can go ahead and drill all your countersink holes, and you know none of them go through. If they go through, you can't use that hole. You'll have to plug it and put a hole somewhere else. I'm setting up to cut some teak plugs. Now, you can use any old piece of teak offcut. I've got one here I've already been using to cut plugs out of. And don't throw any teak away ever, because these are the smallest bits of useful teak that you'll need, but you will need them. The countersink I've been using determines the size of the plug that you need. This is the one, I think it's a 3/8 of an inch, and this is a 3/8 of an inch plug cutter. These are American ones, which are very good. I bought them years ago and they're still sharp. The way to tell if you've got the right size plug cutter is quite simple. That countersink should be a really nice snug fit inside the plug cutter. So this is the one. I've just counted the amount of plugs I need, and it's 55. That's how many screws it's taken to fit the two pieces of teak to the side of the boat. So I'll get cutting. The best way to do this is actually on a drill press. Don't have one of those, you can do it freehand. Everything wobbles around a bit, but you get the same result in the end. Because of the scarcity of teak at the moment, I'm going to use some of the existing teak parts that came off. We've actually only got 2 pieces left, but I'm going to use them. Right here I'm looking at the aft port side quarter. This is the vertical and this is the horizontal. And I'm going to use this one, pre-made. It's just a little bit thinner. It sort of tapers down at the end here. So what I'm going to do to make this match up is I'm just going to taper this aft section down a bit. It only needs to be 2 millimeters, something like that, and it'll blend into that one. So I'm going to use a belt sander to take this off and then finish it up with the 80 grit orbital. Well, the port side timbers are in, except for the forward vertical. This is the aft one. Miraculously, that one just fitted straight in. The miters at the end here that were all shaped remotely, they've ended up quite a good fit. This is on permanently now. All that's left is to plug these holes. These are just screwed in, there's no glue involved. On the other side here, all the screws are in, all tightened up. So the horizontal trims, after being out of here for at least 3 years, I think, are now in on both sides. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making these vertical pieces of teak. There's a couple of double angles in here which we're going to make. Here's the piece of teak that I've just shaped with the bull nose on one side. It's also got an 11.5 degree angle, which is this angle in here. And now I've got to cut the ends to shape. The way I'm doing that, once again, I made a plywood strip that fits into that angle. I made another plywood strip which fits into the bottom angle. All I'm going to do is staple these together. So I put my top one in, put my bottom one in. There's the pattern, and I'll transfer that onto my piece of teak, and it should be fairly close. One goes into there. We've got a last bit to put in here, which is over the nav station, starboard side. This also is a new one that I had to make. These are all going to blend together beautifully when the varnish goes on, I hope. What What I'm doing here with these little tiny teak plugs is I'm gluing them in, and they cover the screw holes. I actually mark them, put a little pencil line on the back of them so you can see which way the grain is. It just looks so much better if the grain always runs the same way. So I'm down on the boat today, day after I've glued all my plugs in. I'm just about to cut all of these off and then sand them down. All we do here is just take a hammer and a chisel. As long as you've glued these in with a decent amount of glue, it should completely fill the little gap around them, and also it gives you a guide. You know, you won't be able to cut them off too short with the chisel because the glue line will stop you from doing that. And always chop along with the grain. So I'm just at the stage now where I'm sanding the plugs flush. There's not much timber on each plug to remove, so I'm just going straight in with the 120. It's really quick. As you can see, I've got the whole lot tinted up. Orbital sander is hooked up to vacuum cleaner. I'd say it gets 80% of the dust. And I'm just going along and just taking the tops off of these, and then I'll give it a once over with, I think I've got some pretty fine discs there, or just a hand sand with some 320. I'll be ready for varnishing. I'm doing the final bit of putting these hand rails on. There's the one over the nav station there. Reposition that one slightly. Originally it was back here a bit, and if you stood up suddenly from the nav seat, you whack your head on it. So I've just moved that forward a bit. Next to is the sort of midway, just opposite where the mast is, and then the forward one's gonna come up here, and then you've got door jambs, etc. to hang on to. The Teak Trims are 20mm thick. I'm screwing them on with 12 gauge stainless steel self-tapping screws. There's 4 on each handle, and I don't know what sort of weight you could hang off that, but I think it's probably more than 100 kilos. And so I'm just clearing these holes out in here. They're countersunk a bit because they've got to go through a fair bit of timber, and then we'll screw them on. Well, putting these teak trims back in here has been a long process, fair bit of work, although we did reuse these handles, but a lot of work reshaping these things and getting them back in. And it's very satisfying to see Chief Varnisher Shaz varnishing the teak.
Well, that is another part of the refit done and dusted. Yay! That's just been a huge milestone. It may not look like much, but it is, because those teak trims were actually one of the first things that got removed. Well done, babe.
Yeah, we've been quite a while without these teak pieces. They were removed because we had to replace the plywood in those cabin sides, which was rotted. Anyway, they're all back in now, and we're ready to move on to the next stage, which is Corian.
Which has arrived.
We better go and
Pick it
crack
up
on with that.